Hello everyone, welcome back to Marriage is Not the End. Here, we look at the many faces of marriage and savor all the bittersweet emotions behind love. Today's story, some people call it a satisfying revenge tale, while others say it's a tragedy. To me, it feels more like a mirror. It reflects the deepest desires hidden in human nature, and shows just how far a person can fall when those desires spiral out of control. Our heroine today is a woman we'll call Jessica. Jessica was born into a middle-class family. They weren't extremely wealthy, but her parents were respectable, and her life was stable. If everything had gone according to plan, she might have become a doctor, holding a scalpel, saving lives, and living a calm, fulfilling life. But fate gave her a contrast. Her sister, Amanda. Amanda wasn't Jessica's biological sister. She had been adopted when they were children. Yet from the day she entered the household, she became the center of attention. She had a sweet tongue, knew how to charm people, and always understood exactly how to win adults over. Jessica, on the other hand, was quiet and reserved. She didn't compete or fight for attention. Whenever she felt wronged, she simply swallowed her feelings. Over time, the family developed a strange dynamic. Even though Jessica was their biological daughter, her parents always seemed to favor Amanda. If Amanda wanted something, all she had to do was pout a little, and her parents would hand it over. If Jessica wanted something, she had to fight for it herself, and even then she would hear, why can't you learn from your sister and be more considerate? Of course Jessica felt hurt. But she learned to stay silent. She told herself that someday she would grow up, leave this house, and live her own life. What she didn't realize was that some people are impossible to avoid, no matter how much you try. And some people's ambition doesn't shrink just because you step aside. The turning point came when Jessica was 22. That year, she was preparing to marry her fiancé, Brandon. Brandon came from a wealthy family, the well-known CF family in their city. They had been dating for several years, and their relationship seemed stable. Brandon was generally attentive to Jessica. Sometimes, Jessica felt that Brandon paid a little too much attention to Amanda. But she convinced herself it was nothing, he probably just treated Amanda like an older sister. On the day of the wedding, everything was ready. Jessica stood in the church in her wedding dress, waiting for Brandon to come for her. She waited. And waited. Guests began whispering. Her parents' expressions grew darker and darker. Finally, what arrived was not Brandon, but a note. The note was from Brandon. It said, Amanda is pregnant with my child. The CF family must have an heir. You've already taken her parents, don't take the position of Mrs. CF from her too. Jessica stood there holding the note, unable to say a single word. Taken her parents? Those are my biological parents. A child? How long have they been together? He was gone for only 6 months, how is she already pregnant? Questions flooded her mind, but no one gave her any answers. Brandon and Amanda had already disappeared without a trace. The wedding was cancelled. The guests left. And Jessica became the laughingstock of their entire social circle. That night, Jessica sat alone in the empty church. She didn't cry. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. It felt like something was lodged in her chest, blocking her breath. And then someone walked up to her. It was Christopher, Brandon's cousin. Christopher's position in the CF family wasn't much better than Jessica's. A few years earlier, he had been in a terrible car accident. He had been in a coma for 2 full years and had only recently woken up. Even after waking, his body had never fully recovered. He needed a cane to walk, and his right hand wasn't very functional. Worse still, the accident had damaged the most sensitive part of his body. In society's eyes, he was now considered less than a man. Because of that, he had little presence in the CF family. Although the family patriarch cared about him, everyone else had already written him off as useless. No one expected anything from him, certainly not that he would inherit the family business. But that night, Christopher walked up to Jessica. He didn't ask any questions. He simply placed his coat over her shoulders, sat beside her, and kept her company. After a long while, he finally spoke. I know you probably don't want to talk to anyone right now, he said. But there's something I want to tell you. When I was lying in the hospital in a coma, no one came to see me. No one, except one person. That was you. You came with Brandon to visit me. You brought flowers and told me you hoped I'd recover soon. You probably don't remember. But I do. And back then, I told myself that if I ever woke up, I would find a way to thank you. Jessica froze. She really didn't remember. To her, it had just been a small, casual act of kindness. She never expected anyone to remember it. Christopher continued. I'm not here to persuade you to do anything. I just want you to know that you haven't been abandoned by everyone. At least, you still have me." That night, Jessica finally cried. All the humiliation, anger, and resentment she had been holding inside poured out. Christopher simply sat beside her, saying nothing, occasionally handing her a tissue. Later, the patriarch of the CF family came to see Jessica. His name was Robert, the head of the family, grandfather to both Brandon and Christopher. He had spent his entire life in the business world and had seen every kind of storm. When he called Jessica to meet him, he spoke directly. "Child, I know you've been wronged. That bastard Brandon, I no longer consider him my grandson. But the CF family cannot be without a lady of the house." He paused, then said, "What do you think of Christopher? He may have just woken up, but the fact that he survived means he's blessed. If you're willing, the wedding can continue. In the future, the CF family will be in the hands of the two of you." Jessica looked at the old man, unsure how to respond. Then she turned to Christopher. Christopher was looking at her as well. There was no expectation in his eyes, only calm acceptance. As if he were saying, "Whatever decision you make, I'll respect it." Jessica stayed silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "Grandpa, may I ask you a question?" Robert nodded. Jessica asked, "Do you really not mind my hand? You should know that it was injured before. I may never be able to hold a scalpel again." Robert smiled. "Child," he said, "when you've lived as long as I have, you learn something. In this world, people can pretend about many things. But there are two things you can never fake. One is ability. The other is the human heart. You have both. As for your hand, that's not what matters. Christopher has a good heart too. And he has ability. When the two of you stand together, what obstacle could possibly stop you?" Jessica's eyes reddened again after hearing that. She looked at Christopher and asked softly, "You don't mind me?" Christopher smiled, a particularly warm smile. "What right do I have to mind?" he said. "I'm half broken myself. If you're willing, we can just make a life together. I promise you this, if anyone ever bullies you again, I'll deal with them." Jessica thought for a moment and said, "All right, then." And just like that, Jessica and Christopher got married. The wedding was simple, no guests, no flowers. Only Grandpa Robert and a few elders from the CF family were present. But to Jessica, it felt far more solid and real than the grand wedding she once planned with Brandon that never happened. Married life turned out to be better than she expected. Christopher's health hadn't fully recovered, but he never wallowed in self-pity. Every morning he would get up early to make Jessica breakfast. His right hand still wasn't very steady, so his fried eggs were often burned, but he never gave up. Sometimes Jessica would watch him fumbling around in the kitchen and couldn't help laughing. Christopher would pretend to be offended. "What are you laughing at? This is sincerity, okay? If you don't want to eat it, I will. Then you can cook another one." Jessica would smile, take the plate, and say, "Who said I don't want it? I like it even if it's burnt." Besides cooking, Christopher also accompanied Jessica to physical therapy. Jessica's right hand had been severely injured in an earthquake. Ironically, it happened when she was trying to save Brandon. At the time, the three of them had been traveling together when the earthquake struck. Brandon was trapped under a collapsed wall. Jessica fought desperately to pull him out. But just as she managed to free him, an aftershock hit. Jessica herself was crushed by falling debris. Brandon heard Amanda crying and ran toward her, leaving Jessica behind. By the time rescuers pulled Jessica out, the bones in her right hand had already been shattered. The best treatment window had passed. From then on, her right hand never regained full strength. Jessica had originally been a medical student, determined to become a surgeon. But after that accident, she could no longer hold a scalpel. When Christopher learned about this, he didn't say much. He simply took Jessica to the rehab center every day. He was undergoing therapy himself. His legs also needed recovery after the car accident. The two of them encouraged each other and competed with each other. When Christopher fell, Jessica helped him up. When Jessica grew exhausted from training, Christopher would tell her jokes. One time Jessica became so frustrated during therapy that tears nearly fell. Christopher walked up to her and raised his own trembling right hand. "Look," he said. "My hand shakes like crazy too. But that's okay. We'll take it slowly. One day, you'll be able to hold a scalpel again. And I'll be able to stand strong again. When that happens, we'll open a clinic together. You'll be the doctor, and I'll be the nurse. How does that sound?" Jessica burst out laughing. "You? A nurse? Aren't you afraid you'll drop the patients?" Christopher said very seriously, "Nope. I'll only be your nurse. I won't take care of anyone else." Jessica laughed so hard that tears came out. From that moment on, she never gave up again. On the day Jessica finished her rehabilitation program, Christopher finally confessed his feelings. You know, he said, I used to think life was pretty unfair to me. I had that accident, spent 2 years in a coma, and when I woke up, I couldn't do anything. But then I met you, and I realized something. Maybe life saved the best thing for me. Jessica, I like you. Not because I pity you. Not because you once saved me. I like you because of who you are. You're strong, kind, and you never give up. I want to spend my life with you. If you're willing, let's live our lives well together. If you're not, that's okay too. I'll still be your friend. Jessica looked at him silently for a long time. Then she said, Christopher, do you know why I agreed to marry you in the first place? Christopher shook his head. Jessica said, because that night in the church, you sat beside me and didn't say a word. But I knew you understood me. You understood my humiliation. You understood my unwillingness to accept it. I didn't need to say anything, you were just there. I've never felt that from anyone else in my life. So, I was willing. And just like that, the two of them went from fellow patients to husband and wife. Their married life was peaceful and happy. Christopher's health improved little by little. He still had a slight limp, but he no longer needed a cane. Jessica's right hand also recovered significantly. She still couldn't perform surgery, but she could handle most daily tasks again. Then one day, Jessica discovered she was pregnant. The news sent the entire CF family into celebration. Grandpa Robert was so happy he could hardly stop smiling. Every day he had people deliver nourishing tonics to Jessica. Other family elders also came to visit, and the whole household was filled with joy. But just then, the two people who had disappeared for half a year returned. Brandon and Amanda. Their timing was suspicious. Grandpa Robert had just undergone a minor surgery and was recovering in the hospital. Somehow rumors began circulating outside that he was in a coma and near death. Brandon and Amanda must have heard the rumor. Thinking their chance had come, they hurried back to fight for the inheritance. That day, Jessica was in the hospital room accompanying Grandpa Robert. He had just finished surgery. His body was weak, but he was conscious. Holding Jessica's hand, he said softly, Child, you've worked hard. These past few days, you're the only one who's stayed by my side. I haven't seen anyone else. Jessica smiled. Grandpa, please don't say that. You've always been good to Christopher and me. Taking care of you is the least we can do. Robert nodded, about to say something else, when suddenly the hospital room door burst open. Brandon and Amanda rushed in. After 6 months, they both looked different. Brandon was dressed in an expensive suit, looking confident and full of swagger. Amanda wore a loose dress, her belly slightly rounded, it seemed she really was pregnant. The moment Brandon entered, he rushed to the bedside and grabbed Robert's hand, putting on an exaggerated expression of joy. Grandpa, you're awake. Did you wake up because you sensed I came back? Robert was still recovering and had trouble speaking. After struggling for a moment, he finally forced out 2 words, you disgrace. Brandon either didn't hear it, or pretended not to. He continued enthusiastically, Grandpa Inging and I came back to see you. She's pregnant. You're going to be a great-grandfather. The CF family finally has an heir. Amanda stepped forward as well, speaking gently. Yes, Grandpa, I'm pregnant. Aren't you happy? Oh, little sister is here too. Jessica, you've been taking care of Grandpa? That must have been so hard. Jessica felt a wave of disgust at Amanda's fake sweetness, but she held her tongue in front of Robert. Brandon then turned to Jessica. His expression instantly changed. Frowning, he spoke in a condescending tone. Jiang Qing, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be back in your hometown? Jessica replied calmly, I'm taking care of Grandpa. Brandon sneered. Taking care of Grandpa? I think you're just trying to make yourself look good in front of him while we're gone. I've seen plenty of people like you, always playing these little tricks. Amanda quickly tugged at Brandon's arm and said gently, Brandon, don't talk about my sister like that. She meant well. Even though she did do some things that weren't very proper, we shouldn't judge her too harshly. Jessica frowned. What did I do that wasn't proper? Amanda glanced at her, hesitating, as if reluctant to speak. Finally, as if summoning courage, she said, Jessica, I didn't want to say this in front of Grandpa. But since you asked, I'll just say it. The child you're carrying, whose is it? Jessica froze for a moment. Of course it's my husband's. Amanda smiled, a soft, gentle smile. Jessica, she said sweetly, there's no need to lie. Your husband? Christopher? Everyone knows what happened after his car accident. How could he possibly get you pregnant? Brandon chimed in immediately. Exactly. The whole CF family knows. The accident injured that part of him. He can't even function. The baby you're carrying must belong to some random guy you hooked up with, right? Jessica trembled with anger. She was just about to respond when Brandon suddenly rushed forward and pointed at her nose. "You shameless woman. It's bad enough you cheated on me. Now you're trying to pass someone else's kid off as a member of the CF family? I'm going to teach you a lesson today." He raised his hand to slap her. At that moment, a cold voice came from the doorway. "I'd like to see who dares to touch her." Everyone froze and turned toward the door. Christopher stood there, leaning on his cane, his face dark with fury. Brandon paused for a moment, then burst into laughter. Well, if it isn't my cousin. I heard you woke up. Perfect timing. You should come see the wonderful things your wife's been up to." Christopher ignored him completely and walked straight to Jessica. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Jessica shook her head and took his hand. Seeing this, Brandon laughed even louder. "Wow, look at that, what a loving couple. Cousin, you really surprise me. Back then you wouldn't even use something someone else had touched. Now you're picking up my leftovers? And not even second-hand, third-hand." Christopher's eyes turned cold. He gestured to the bodyguard beside him. The bodyguard stepped forward immediately and punched Brandon square in the face. Brandon staggered backward, nearly falling. Clutching his cheek, he shouted, "Have you lost your mind? You dare hit me?" Christopher replied calmly, "So what if I hit you? You insult my wife, I'd be going easy on you if that's all you get." Brandon tried to argue again, but the bodyguard had already shoved him to the ground and kicked him a few more times. Amanda screamed in terror and rushed forward to stop them, but another bodyguard blocked her. Christopher walked over and looked down at Brandon. "Listen carefully," he said coldly. "Jessica is my wife. The child she's carrying is mine. If I hear one more filthy word out of your mouth, I'll make sure you never speak again." Brandon lay on the ground, his face bloody, but he still refused to give in. "That's impossible. You can't even function. How could she possibly be carrying your child?" Christopher sneered. "Who told you I couldn't? The doctors say I've fully recovered. Don't believe me?" Brandon froze. He turned to look at Amanda, confusion filling his eyes. Amanda's face had already gone pale as paper. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Christopher ignored them after that. He turned and gently supported Jessica. "Let's go," he said softly. "Don't waste time on them. I'll handle Grandpa's arrangements." Jessica nodded and left the hospital room with him. From that day on, Brandon and Amanda's lives began to unravel. After Grandpa Robert was discharged from the hospital, the first thing he did was call a full family meeting. At the meeting, he officially announced Christopher as the heir of the CF family. All the shares of the family business were transferred into Christopher's name. Brandon refused to accept it. He brought Amanda and their baby to kneel in front of Robert, wailing and begging. "I'm your biological grandson. This child is the CF family's only male heir. You can't be so unfair." Robert looked at him with deep disappointment. After a long sigh, he said, "Brandon, you think you're part of the CF bloodline? You're wrong. You're not." Brandon froze. "Grandpa, what did you just say?" Robert waved his hand tiredly. "I never intended to reveal this. But since you've pushed things this far, I'll tell you the truth. You are not my biological grandson. When your mother gave birth, she had a daughter. In order to compete for the family inheritance, she secretly switched the baby. By the time we learned the truth, the real child was already gone. And there's more. Christopher's car accident was arranged by your father. He wanted to wipe out the Sia bloodline so that you could inherit everything." Brandon sat there stunned. He knelt on the floor, muttering over and over, "No, that's impossible. I'm your grandson. I have to be your grandson," but no one paid attention to him anymore. Robert kept his promise. He didn't take back the house and car Brandon already owned. But aside from that, Brandon didn't receive a single cent. Amanda, who had been standing nearby, completely collapsed when she heard the truth. Crying hysterically, she turned to Jessica. "Jessica, what about my baby? You can't ignore him. You're his aunt, you can't be this heartless." Jessica looked at her calmly. "First, you're not my sister. We have no blood relationship. Second, you stole my fiancé and ran away with him. I didn't force you. Third, the child in your stomach is one you chose to have. I didn't put him there. So what happens to your child has nothing to do with me." Amanda cried even harder. But no matter how much she cried, it didn't matter. Jessica had already turned and walked away. The most ironic part was that Amanda had actually started a live stream earlier that day. She wanted to show off her luxurious life after marrying into a wealthy family to her followers. Instead, everything that just happened had been broadcast live. Her fans watched as she went from rich family wife to homewrecker who knowingly stole another woman's man. People unfollowed her immediately. Former fans turned on her even harder than critics. Overnight, Amanda became a laughingstock across the internet. After that, her career completely collapsed. No orchestra would hire her. No event organizers invited her to perform. The only places she could find work were bars and tea houses, playing the cello just to barely make ends meet. But soon creditors came knocking. Brandon had developed a gambling addiction and racked up tens of millions in debt. To escape collectors, they kept moving, again and again. Every time Amanda found a new job, the debt collectors would eventually track them down. Eventually, even the bars stopped hiring her. When poverty enters a marriage, love often disappears. The once deeply devoted couple began blaming each other constantly. Brandon accused Amanda of seducing him and ruining his life. Amanda blamed Brandon for being useless and unable to support his family. The last time anyone saw them together was outside a second-hand store. They were arguing in the street about whether they could afford a used baby stroller. Amanda wore outdated clothes. Heavy foundation covered her face, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the dullness of her skin. Brandon stood nearby holding a bottle of alcohol, drunkenly shouting curses. Amanda, the woman who once dreamed of becoming a wealthy socialite, who believed stealing another woman's man meant winning everything, had become the very kind of person she once looked down on. And Jessica? Her life with Christopher only got better and better. Christopher eventually made a full recovery. His limp disappeared, and he could even go jogging with Jessica. Jessica's right hand recovered significantly as well. Although she could no longer perform surgery, she transitioned into working as a medical consultant and still helped many people. After their daughter was born, Grandpa Robert was overjoyed. He carried his great-granddaughter everywhere and refused to put her down. Christopher took over the family business and led the company to new success. Jessica, meanwhile, started a small foundation from home, dedicated to helping young people whose careers were cut short by injuries or accidents. One day, Jessica asked Christopher, "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me?" Christopher was in the middle of reading their daughter a bedtime story. Hearing the question, he looked up, completely puzzled. "Regret what?" he said. "Regret not stealing you away sooner?" Jessica laughed. "I'm serious. You could have married someone better." Christopher set the storybook down and looked at her carefully. "Jessica, listen to me," he said. "In my eyes, you are the best. No exceptions." Jessica's eyes reddened again, but this time they were tears of happiness. Christopher added, "And you know what? I think we're a perfect match. Look at it this way, you saved Brandon, and he ran away. I had my accident, and nobody cared. We were both people who got abandoned, but we didn't abandon each other. Isn't that better than all that nonsense about perfect matches and ideal couples?" Jessica nodded. "Yeah, it really is." Christopher grinned. "Exactly. So stop overthinking things. We've got a long life ahead of us." Yes, a long life ahead. Occasionally, Jessica would still hear news about Brandon and Amanda. The latest rumor was this: Brandon's right hand had been chopped off by debt collectors and thrown into the wilderness. By the time someone found him, it was too late to reattach it. Amanda had disappeared with the child. Some people claimed they'd seen her in a cheap motel in another state. Jessica felt nothing when she heard it. No hatred. No pity. It felt like hearing a story about strangers. Sometimes she wondered, what if Brandon had never run away? What if she had married him? Then there would be no Christopher, no daughter, no warm home like the one she had now. Maybe she would have become a bitter wife, constantly wondering if Brandon was still thinking about Amanda. Or perhaps she would have turned into a resentful stepmother, fighting endlessly with Amanda's child. Either way, none of those futures would have been better than the life she had now. So in a strange way, she was grateful. Grateful that Brandon chose not to marry her. Grateful that Amanda stole him away. Because it gave her the chance to meet the person who was truly right for her. By now, you might think this story is just one of those satisfying tales where good people are rewarded and bad people get what they deserve. But honestly, the part of this story that moved me most isn't the revenge or the justice. It's those days Jessica and Christopher spent together in the rehab center. You know something? When people are at their weakest, what they need most isn't sympathy. It isn't pity. It's not even help. What they need is companionship. The kind that says, "I know this is hard for you. It's hard for me too. But we'll get through it together." That's the kind of relationship Jessica and Christopher had. They didn't have dramatic confessions or grand romantic vows. Instead, they slowly carved themselves into each other's lives, through every fall and every step forward, through every argument of "You can do it. If you can't, I will." That kind of love is far stronger than passion at first sight. Because it has been tested. Not by grand tragedies like life and death, but by the small, exhausting, everyday trials of life. It's choosing to stay beside someone when they're at their most awkward, helpless, and vulnerable. So what is marriage? Some people say marriage is the grave of love. Some say it's a siege, people outside want in, people inside want out. Others say it's like running a company with a partner. But to me, marriage is simply this: two people carrying the weight of life together. The trivial things, the ups and downs of fate, the joys and hardships that only the two of you truly understand. If you carry it together and make it through, you become the closest people in each other's lives. If you can't, then you simply become strangers. Jessica and Christopher carried it together. That's why they won. As for Brandon and Amanda, from the beginning, they never wanted to carry any burdens. All they wanted was to take, to grab, to gain something for nothing. And that's why they lost, completely. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this channel, please like, subscribe, and share it so more people can see that marriage isn't the end, happiness is. And if you have your own story to share, feel free to leave it in the comments. Maybe next time, I'll be telling your story. See you in the next episode.